And there we go. I think we're recording. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is the UC Davis Health Professions Post-Bacc program. One unique thing about our program is that we have a January start. And just to quickly answer your question, Oren, this is going to be emailed out to all the students who registered for the webinar. So you're going to receive it in an email, and same with those who registered but couldn't attend. So our program is what I consider to be off cycle, but in a good way. Off cycle meaning we start in January of every year. So our students do coursework for 4 full quarters. It would go winter quarter starting in January, then spring, then summer, then fall. And throughout that entire time, you are just focused on school and studying for your standardized exam, whether that's the MCAT, DAT, OAT, if you're pre-optometry, TEAS and HESI exams, if you're pre-nursing, and so forth. And so the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure you can go through a full calendar year, January through December, of uninterrupted time, just rehabilitating that GPA, securing that upward trend, studying for that exam, which while still allowing an additional 6 months after that, which would be the following year, January through June, for us to prep your application without being rushed. You may notice that a lot of other post-bacc programs, they start in fall. So you would typically do a fall quarter, and you would go winter and spring. But right when the program ends, that med school or dental or nursing application is open. You've got to get the test done. You've got to get the application done, and it can be very stressful. So our approach is more of a slower progression through it so that you can fully digest every step. And throughout that year, that academic year, like I mentioned, you'll be meeting with us very frequently. You'll get to know us. So our support for you will be that first academic year, again, that January through December, but the following January through December, when you're actually in the cycle, we're walking you through it the entire time. So it's technically a 1-year post-bacc, but it's 2 years of support. It's kind of how I like to frame it. So let's keep going. As I mentioned, we serve all health professions, sorry, and our program is an academic enhancing program only. What that means is you need to make sure you have all of your prerequisites completed for your intended health profession before applying to our program, give or take maybe 1 or 2. We can work with 1 or 2, but you need to have the overwhelming majority of your prereqs complete. So we're talking a full year of general chemistry, a full year of organic chemistry, full year of physics, full year of general biology, right? So think about those things. And if you have questions later about whether or not an academic enhancing program or a career changing post-bacc program is better for you, happy to discuss that later. But if you know that you're missing quite a few prerequisites, you really do want to consider looking at some career changer programs, or even considering some DIY, do-it-yourself post-bacc options, which I'm happy to discuss later. So we have a 12-month program, as I mentioned, or you can also do a single quarter option. So let's say your upward trend is actually pretty good. You just need maybe 1 more quarter to top it off. You can do 1 quarter with us. Or maybe you are pre-PA or pre-nursing and you're missing 1 or 2 prereqs that we happen to have here, whether that's microbiology or anatomy. You can take those here with us in a single quarter session. So I just wanted to highlight, there are 2 options when it comes to joining us here at UC Davis for post-bacc work. So beyond our January start date, we have built-in test prep. And one feature of our program that makes us pretty different from other programs is that we have year-long test preparation for the MCAT. So many of you may be familiar with the Princeton Review or Kaplan, a lot of these kind of like 3 to 4 month courses for the MCAT. And I do see that working for a lot of students. And then I have a handful of other students who feel like they need a slower progression through that material. So if that's you and you feel like you don't want to necessarily have more of a jam-packed study experience, you want to gradually work your way through, this would be a great program for you. You'll study for the MCAT for roughly an hour to an hour and a half every day, Monday through Friday, for about a year. And you'll do that in addition to your coursework. So you're slowly building everything that you need for the exam without it feeling like this big regurgitation after kind of cramming it all in for 3 months, which again, it really does work for some students, but everyone's different. So we like to have this different approach here in this program, and it's produced really great results in terms of MCAT scores and having students not be so stressed out when they go and sit for the test. And I'll talk a little bit more about test prep later, especially how the MCAT and DAT differ a little bit there. Again, we have preparation for the GRE, DAT, OAT, lots of these other exams. During the summertime, we have what's called a track system for hands-on experiential learning. So you will be able to choose between the research track, where you'd be integrated into a UC Davis research lab. You would be, you'd have the option of choosing health equity, which is where we place you in a lot of different health equity sites where maybe they're working on some initiatives for their community, and you'd be able to join in those volunteer efforts. We'd pair you with a certain site for that. And then finally, if you wanted the clinical track, because maybe you're lacking a bit in clinical experience, we will connect you with the UC Davis Fire Department, and you will become EMT certified, and they will help you secure a position as an EMT after you leave our program. So all of that will start in the summertime, and you're going to still spend your first 2 quarters just focused on school, plant your feet strong, get those A's. Then we will add that extra layer of extracurriculars. Question in the chat: what if the only class I'm missing is organic chemistry, but I feel general chemistry? So we can definitely talk about that. I'm going to put our email here. Let me actually send this to everyone. I'm going to put our email in the chat. Any questions that you all have, feel free to send us a direct email about your specific case. If you're missing a full year of organic chemistry, I would say you'd want to handle that before applying, especially if you kind of need to get a grip on Gen Chem as well. But again, if there's a chance that we can still work it out, we're happy to talk with you about it and see if we can put together a plan that makes sense. But great question. Committee letter, I mentioned a little bit about this earlier. For dental schools and med schools, it is very much helpful to your application to have a committee letter. It is what those admissions committees prefer. So again, if you meet the criteria for receiving a committee letter from our team, it's written with myself. We have 2 faculty members who have joint appointments between the UC Davis College of Biological Sciences and the UC Davis School of Medicine. So we have very strong support backing up your application and essentially formally endorsing you as an applicant if you qualify for that, which almost all of our students have in the past. There are a couple of hiccups here and there if a student decides that they didn't want to finish the program or, personal reasons, but typically our students do really well and they all qualify for that. And wraparound advising is what I was referring to earlier as the second year of advising that we do with you after your coursework is done. So we will stick with you for a full 2 years, just to make sure that while you're going through the cycle, you know what to do, you know the strategy, you understand how to navigate, and you don't have to just kind of, fend for yourself. Because in our opinion, it's one thing for you all to go through a formal post-bac program, get amazing grades, and have that to be able to show to schools. But it's another thing for us to kind of just drop you off there and not show you how to really go through the cycle, right? So that second year is honestly even more important than that first year. Can someone who took all med school prereqs over 7 years ago still be? Yes, absolutely. I want to be really clear though, if you are pre-med, the age of your prerequisites doesn't matter. I've had students 15 years out from undergrad apply to med school, get accepted because their MCAT was decent. So as long as you can demonstrate proficiency on your MCAT, the age of your prereqs doesn't matter. But if you are pre-nursing or pre-PA, it does matter. And usually about 5 years out, they want you to retake the prereqs if they're 5 years or more older, okay? And what's the difference between this post-bac and the UC consortium? So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll go back to it. This program is a health professions post-bac program. So we're admitting students who are pre-med, pre-dental, pre-nursing, pre-PA. Our program is a bit larger. We admit about 50 to 55 students every year. We have year-long test preparation. We fundamentally have the same leadership as the UC consortium, but our home base for this program is on the undergrad campus. And for the consortium, their home base is on the School of Medicine campus. But for the UC consortium post-bac at the School of Medicine, their focus is students who are underrepresented in medicine or come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So you have to meet one of those criteria to be eligible for that program. For ours, we accept everyone. So hopefully that's clear. Okay. And you're welcome. And finally, the last, I would say, major feature I'd like to highlight about our program is Timely MD. So Timely MD is it's a mental health support service for our students. It's just for the post-bac students, so you don't have to share your counseling sessions with undergrad students or anything like that. Our students have access to 18 counseling appointments per year, because going through a post-bac program, while it's an amazing experience, it can be very stressful. You're trying to get A's, you're trying to get really high standardized exam scores, and you're going to need to talk to someone at some point, typically. And so we just really like to have that for our students. Beyond us as advisors checking in with you weekly, we want you all to be able to have access to providers to just help you process what's going on and keep your mental health in a really good place. I would say that for all the students I've worked with over the last decade or so that are applying to health professional programs, the ones that are really successful are the ones who really take good care of their mental health, and they have a balance. So we're very, very big on that in this program. If we notice that someone is extremely intense, or if you're kind of that phrasing of like the pre-med gunners, all of that, where like you're stressing everyone out, we nip that in the bud very early. This is not a program that you're going to come to where everyone is super competitive and they're again stressing each other out. It's very supportive, and that's because it really comes from the leadership down. And we really try to admit students who already are demonstrating their ability to be collaborative and want to work as a team. So that's a quick tip for those of you who are going to apply and you may get granted an interview. We are very much looking for students who are team players, right? I'll keep going. This is just a quick snapshot here of our curriculum. As I mentioned, we start in January. You'd be there for that first quarter. You would start off with 3 upper division science classes. If you're able to get straight A's in those 3, that's when we really allow students to bump up to 4 if they would like to. The truth is that 3 upper div science classes together on the quarter system is considered rigorous to medical schools, dental schools, vet schools, you name it. So you never actually need to take more than 3 unless I can see where your entering GPA is, and I may say, hey, you might actually need 4 in spring and 4 in fall, because I really need you to get over that 3.0 science GPA or something like that. But if we're really just trying to establish rigor, 3 classes is fine. So we start everyone off there. Again, you can go up to 4 for spring. We do a little bit lighter in the summer because you will be doing your track experience. So most students actually take 2 to 3 rather than 1 to 2. A lot take 4 in the fall. You will have seminars each quarter that are mandatory to get your committee letter. We start you off with learning and test taking strategies. So we try to work on your confidence as a test taker, which is honestly half the battle when it comes to the MCAT and DAT. We have a test prep specialist in our program named Douglas McLemore. He used to work for a test prep company that you all are very familiar with for roughly 15 years, I'd say, and then decided to kind of plant himself at an institution. We're very thankful that he planted himself here. So he will work with each of you one-on-one on your test taking strategies and your learning strategies to help you attack your material a bit better. You'll then go into medical terminology, which is a course that's really helpful if you choose to do, let's say, like the EMT track and want to be an EMT, because a lot of the terms you're going to learn here, you're also going to see in that program. So everyone will do that. Narrative medicine is a course that I teach, and we are really talking about the power of the narrative of your patients and not just talking over them or not assuming that you know their story, but really diving deep into active listening and me helping to equip you all with that portion of it, and also understanding your own story and your own narrative and why it's powerful. I think one of the biggest questions I get as an advisor is, I don't know if there's anything special about me, like nothing dramatic happened in my life. So I don't know that, if someone reads my personal statement, I don't know if they're going to think I'm special. Each and every person has something unique about them. There is some unique perspective you have. You may just not know what it is, or you may have never really done some exercises to figure it out. That's what that seminar is all about. is so you can become confident in your narrative, because you're going to need to be confident in your narrative to be competitive in these cycles. Okay, so we talk about that. And then in the fall, we do application preparation. If you notice, we save that for the very last quarter because you're still very much ahead of the game if we're discussing how to prepare your application in September of the year prior of when you're actually going to hit submit. So we have plenty of time from September through December to talk about personal statements, experiences, disadvantage statements, collecting all your letters of rec, pre-writing your secondaries, putting together your school list, like all those things. We will walk you through it step by step so you know what to do and when to do it. And after this entire year is over, like I said before, we then have the following January through June to prep everything and make sure it's perfect before the application opens so that you can submit very early in the cycle. Okay, I have a question in the chat. Been a nurse for 10 years. Great question. If you've already taken medical terminology, you can actually opt out of that seminar and you don't have to take a seminar that quarter. So we've had several students who've done quite a bit of coursework before. So that would just be a little bit of a lighter quarter for you, which is great. You can take that extra time and focus deeper on MCAT or whichever health profession you were going to aim for. Great question. Thanks. Okay, let's keep going. So this is an example of a list of classes that we offer in our program. Different classes are offered during different quarters, so I can't guarantee that you'll see neurobiology of addictive drugs in fall or immunology in spring, but the way UC Davis is set up, I kind of just randomize class offerings, but you will always have enough options for your quarter. I tend to always have about 10 to 11 classes per quarter that I'm able to offer the post-bac students, and your job is just to pick 3 to 4. So more than enough, and I will always walk each student through which classes I think would be a great fit together, mostly because I've taken pretty much every class on this list when I was here many moons ago. So I understand the difficulty of what you're going to experience, and so I tend to have more of those appointments with students right at the beginning of a quarter to make sure the schedules align and make sense. I want to spend a quick second and talk about this red point here of reserved spots and courses. This is a really great feature of the program. So you all do not have to handle any registration. There is no portal that you're going to go through and say, I'm going to hope that I get this class. I'm going to hope that I get that class. We already have reserved spots in all of the courses. So you simply tell us what you want and we put you in it. If we offer a class, there's already a guarantee that there's enough spots in it for you to take it. So, and that goes the same for our single quarter option. If you're joining us just for a quarter, and we show you the menu of classes for that quarter, you will have a spot. You don't have to worry about that. Any questions so far? Extra questions? Are we going to go over what is required? Yes, that's going to be a little bit towards the end when we get into the application cycle dates and deadlines, but it's coming. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through test prep. I'm not going to spend too much time, but just a bit. So as I mentioned, Douglas McLemore, he is our test prep specialist, and he's just great working with our students throughout the year. He works with every student one-on-one to make sure you can get the highest score possible. He will start you off with content review. He'll take an inventory of how much content you actually know. And then based on that assessment, he will help you create a personalized study plan so you know what to do during the entire year. Their strategy practice, and we already talked about the test taking strategy seminar that everyone will be in, but you have a bunch of practice questions, passages. He then spends a lot of time on stamina building. And for those of you who are pre-med, I want to speak to you all just for a second. The MCAT is basically an 8-hour exam. And so what I've noticed over the years is that beyond students just learning the content, doing passage practice and all these other things, it's really hard to be sharp for 8 hours. So when you're in this program, you're going to take at least 12 full-length practice tests before you actually sit for the real test. And the importance of that is, again, it's one thing to know the material, but if you can't sit for longer than 4 hours, the MCAT is just not going to go well, right? So we have to practice stamina building. We have to practice you being sharp for an extended period of time, not just the initial, 3 hours. So he helps you develop certain habits throughout the year to where you can build in that way and get really strong. And then confidence boosting at the end. So these are just some of the test prep components that he works with you all on. And here you have access to 16 practice tests with us, but usually you take at least 12. You have those 4 extra ones in case like we're not quite where we want to be at the end of the year. But my rule of thumb is always at least 10. But thankfully in this program, you're at least going to do 12, which is great. For DAT, you're going to do at least 8 exams. It's a little bit, I'm not going to say the DAT is easier than the MCAT because it's not. It's just a different style of testing, and it doesn't require as much intensity in terms of the training part of it. So you'll take about 8 if you're pre-dental or pre-optometry. And we have the GRE, you'll take 10. And the T's, it'll kind of be more so tailored to the student if you're pre-nursing, because there are some differences in school requirements and things of that nature. All right, I'm almost done with test prep, I promise. So this is just a nice little timeline of what it would look like throughout the year. These dates are a little off, but hopefully it gives you the right idea of what we're looking at. So you would do a content inventory with us in the December before you're actually starting. So for you all, you would be cohort 4. So you would be starting January 2024. So we would do a content inventory with you in December of 2023, December of this year. But basically you'd start off with the learning and test taking strategies, then go into content refinement, then go into strategy refinement, and finish with final content and your strategy seminar. So it's just a little bit of a snapshot of the progression of being someone who can really perform well on these exams, and what it really takes to do that at a nice slow chew throughout an entire year rather than like a 3-month experience. And I also wanted to say that if you're not ready to take your standardized exam by the end of the year or the very beginning of that next year, again, we still have January through June before you'd actually hit submit on your application. So you could take a little extra time if you need it. You could push your exam back to March or April. We just have a lot of room for movement and for real life happening, right? Things happen in your life. So it just gives us some time, some wiggle room really, for you to still be able to submit a really competitive application very early in a cycle. Here's my photo debut, just kidding. But yes, this is me and one of my students who's actually in PA school now, which is great. So I am the director, but I'm one of your advisors. Doug is the test prep specialist, also one of your advisors. And Jenny is fully an advisor here. She does everything from meeting with you weekly to walking you through all of the steps of the application, especially in that second year when you're entering the cycle. So we are all here. There are also several other staff members who work with us, but the 3 of us are your main advisors. Aside from the weekly seminars and weekly appointments and us having this nice high touch model, I will do an academic assessment with each of you once you're admitted into the program to tell you where I see you as an applicant, where your weak areas are, the areas that you need to get better in, and what is our plan of action to do that over the course of this year/year and a half before you submit your application. So you will know upfront what our expectations are and how hard we're going to need you to work towards these goals while still making sure it's manageable and we're checking in with mental health and all those good things. And then application preparation. I've said that a million times today, but I keep that as a bullet point on so many slides because it's so important. You can have a 5.18 MCAT and a 3.9 GPA and not get into med school. It happens every single day. And the biggest reason for that is lack of application preparation. The quality of your writing in your application is extremely important. This goes for dental school, vet school, PA school, all of it. If I can't read your personal statement and say to myself, I've got to interview this student, it's not good enough. That is what we work on throughout the year. You need someone to read every single piece of writing you put in, and that admissions committee member needs to say, I've got to meet this student. push them through. It has to be that deep. And I think that that is the biggest reason why students struggle, even when they can get the metrics. And so as a post-bac student, we know that you all are not going to have a 3.7, you know, all of that, and you don't need it. You really just need to have roughly a 3.0 cumulative GPA, 3.0 science GPA, at least those numbers, and an extremely well-written application, and the other kind of bells and whistles that come with your experiences. But there are a lot of small things that students are not aware of when they're going through the cycle that causes them to make little mistakes. And all it takes is one or two little mistakes for a school to say no, because they have thousands of applicants, right? So we want to make sure you know what's going on, you understand how to navigate through that process, and you're submitting a very well-written application, right? I talked about this earlier, so I won't spend too much time, but again, your tracks that you can do in the summer are health equity, the UC Davis EMT program, or joining a research lab. And now we'll dive into the requirements, because I know that was the last question that popped up. So we use a very holistic admissions process, meaning we read every single application that comes through, no matter how low the GPA or how high the GPA, but we do still have some metrics that we need to see to feel confident enough to admit a student into this program, because it is rigorous, it is tough. Again, our students do very well, but we're confident that when we admit a student, they're ready for it. We don't want to bring in any student who maybe just really, really wants to do this, but you're not quite in a place where you can handle it. We don't want to admit you just to see you not do well, right? We really want to admit students who are in a good headspace. They're ready to devote all of their time to this so they can put in a really good year with us and then get into the schools they want to be in and get on to their next step. We want to get you in and get you out so you can go on and do all the great things you're going to do. So we tend to look for a minimum of a 2.8 cumulative GPA. That is not a 2.8 science GPA. It is a 2.8 cumulative GPA. However, I would recommend that your science GPA is not too much, it's not too far under. I can say that the lowest I've admitted is about a 2.5 science GPA. And that was a student that had a really complex background, and we were able to work with that student and get them where they needed to be. But I would say if you're hovering around a 2.8 cumulative, 2.5 science, that's usually a pretty good indicator for us that we can get you where you need to be within a year. If you're on the lower end and your cumulative GPA is maybe a 2.5 or a 2.4, and maybe your science GPA is a 2.1 or a 2.2, we have absolutely helped students in those cases, but we recommend that you go and do some DIY post-bac work before applying to our program. Do 1 or 2 quarters somewhere else, prove to us that you can get straight A's and manage a rigorous course load, then apply. That's really helpful, so we can see that you can do it. But typically our average is students having about a 3.01 GPA, cumulative GPA coming into our program. Question, what classes would look best in a DIY? Wonderful question. So if you go on Google, and I don't want to assume, Ashlyn, that you're pre-med, but if you are, if you go on Google and type in the AAMC, actually, I'll type it into the chat, AAMC course classification guide. These are the classes that medical schools use to put your science GPA, to put it together. So any subject that you see on the course classification guide, if you take any of those subjects in a DIY post-bac, that's exactly what we want to see. So we're talking physiology, microbiology, immunology, any of those types of classes would be great for us to see. Do we retake any courses less than a C-? So in order to apply to medical school successfully, you're going to have a solid C or better in all of your prereqs. But let's say in 1 or 2 of your prereqs, you do have a C-. You can retake 1 C- with us as long as it's general chemistry, organic chemistry, or physics. We can't do general bio because we're too impacted here at Davis. But those 3 classes, if you need to retake 1 C-, again, you can do it with us. But you only need to retake C- in prereqs. If you got a C- in genetics or some fancy operative science in undergrad, don't worry about it. Just move on, because medical schools don't care about C- unless they're in prerequisite courses. So I hope that's clear. So you don't need to go back and retake all the C- that you have, unless they're prereqs. But good question. All right. You need a bachelor's degree from a U.S. institution. Unfortunately, we are not in a position to accept international students unless you are doing the single quarter option. Single quarter, totally fine. But for the full program and for us to do committee letters and things of that nature, we are not yet open to international students. And meaning, if you have a degree from a foreign institution, it has to be a bachelor's degree from a U.S. institution. We want transcripts from every undergraduate institution you've attended, including community college work. Even if you did community college work while you were in high school, some students have that. You need to send every single transcript that you have to Post-Bacc, where our application is. You cannot email us any transcripts. You cannot email us any essays, anything related to the application. It has to go through Post-Bacc. It has to get verified. And once it's verified, they will deliver that to our admissions team. That is the only way to successfully apply. We need 2 letters of recommendation, one from a science professor, one from anyone else. In terms of like a mentor, of course, it can't be like a family member, but some other professional letter that you can get. I will highlight that we do understand if you've been out of school for more than 2 years, meaning you graduated from undergrad 2 or more years ago, it may be very difficult for you to get a science professor to write on your behalf. If that's the case, we will take 2 professional letters. But if you're currently in school right now, or you just graduated, you have to get one from a science professor. All right. Then personal statements and the interview. Those are the last pieces of the puzzle. If you want to know what our personal statement prompts are, they're on our website. So it's hpa.ucdavis. I'll type this in the chat one more time. I don't know if I did this earlier. hpa.ucdavis.edu/Post-Bacc. And if you go on there, you will be able to see the personal statement prompts. There is a general personal statement that you have to write for the Post-Bacc application, which is more of a kind of why medicine or why dentistry or why PA sort of statement. But then we have 3 additional supplemental essays that you must complete in addition to those, so we can learn a little bit more about you and your readiness for a Post-Bacc program of this nature. And finally, we do have an interview process. So if you are invited to an interview, you will receive all the information that you need, and those interviews will be on Zoom. So you will not have to come to Davis for those. Any questions about requirements? Because I know we had some earlier. So I'll pause here for a second and check in. Are any courses offered online? Great question. We always have about half of our courses offered online each quarter. So if you wanted to take almost all of your classes in person, you can do that. If you wanted to take almost all of them online, you could probably do that too. It really just depends on what's offered in that given quarter, but we do have several online options. So yeah, great question. Also, I wanted to point out, I have some staff members here join with me. Douglas McLemore, as I mentioned earlier, our test prep specialist, as well as Jenny, our other advisor. They are in the chat, so they're going to help me answer questions as they come in. So you may see some responses from them as well. So I'm glad to have them here with us. Hi, Jenny. Okay, so let's see. The way to verify study abroad courses on Post-Bacc is confusing. Any tips? Great question, Elizabeth. I actually encourage you to reach out to Post-Bacc directly. They have a helpline. It's a Q&A directly on their website. The reps who work for Post-Bacc can help you navigate that. And it is confusing, I agree, but they will help you. How do you recommend preparing for the rigor of the Post-Bacc program? So a lot of that actually comes from us seeing the coursework that you've done before. So again, if you did some DIY Post-Bacc work before, or if your upward trend at the very end of your undergrad was kind of starting to form, that can at least tell us a lot about maybe the level of coursework that you can handle. But when you're really thinking about preparing for being extremely dedicated to a program of this nature, what you want to think about is, do I actually have the right situation to be able to focus on just school? Because in our program, we do not allow students to work. Now, of course, things happen. Sometimes students have to navigate in the best way that they can, but we really do not recommend students working in the program. We want you to focus fully on school. And so that may mean you asking yourself, financially, can I manage this? Can I manage just doing school? And am I in a better headspace than I was in undergrad? Because a lot of the time, the reason why students need post-bac work is because, you know, they're managing so many things. They've got duties at home, they've got duties at school. It's just a lot going on. You want to ask yourself, can I fully focus on school, block out all distractions, and just dig in? So I would say a good way to answer that question is doing some self-reflection, asking yourself those questions, and then coming here being a collaborative person, being someone who, when you're taking your coursework and you're studying alongside your post-bac student or your other cohort mates, being someone who is a team player, because you're going to need each other to get through the program. You're going to go through a lot of studying and all of those things. So that was a long-winded answer, Ashlyn, but hopefully that somewhat got there. Okay, yeah, we've got Doug here too. Hey, Doug. Which campus will courses be held, Davis or Sacramento? Davis. All of your courses will be on the Davis campus. Oh, I just saw Doug answer that. Okay, let me not answer the ones they're tackling for me. Again, we have had students who work part-time. We just really don't recommend it. Usually when they had those part-time jobs, either the grades started to suffer or something started to suffer, their mental health, and it's just not worth it. When you're coming to a post-bac program and you're trying to prove yourself to these health professions admissions committees, you want to present your best self, especially your best academic self. So I would say, if you know that you're in a place where you can dedicate time just to this, that's how you know you're ready for this program. If you know that you have to work and you know that you have other responsibilities, this might not be the best time to pursue this program. And that's okay. You know, you want to make sure you're making the right decision for yourself. And the requirement, double major. Okay, study abroad. Can you talk more about weekly progress reports? Elizabeth, so you will be able to check in with Doug throughout the year. He has a bunch of test prep drop-in advising hours. So especially when it comes to keeping up with test prep, you will have lots of check-ins there. You're also able to schedule just a traditional advising appointment with myself, Jenny, or Doug about either the coursework you're going through or just questions you may have once a week with us. So they're not necessarily weekly progress reports. It's just that I would refer to them more as weekly check-ins, and we'll be able to let you know how you're progressing through the program the more that we talk to you. Let's see here. I have a C minus. Okay, Jasmine for oh wait, let me finish the question. Let me finish reading it. Hold on. I have a C minus. That would be fine to apply. Yes, that's fine, Jasmine, because you can do one retake of OChem with us, and then Biz 102, you're going to get a biochem class as well later in the program. What about volunteer work here and there? Yeah, so when it comes to volunteer work, especially if you decided to choose the health equity track in the summer, you'll have an opportunity to still get some extracurricular activity in the program, but the goal is that you're already coming in with a good amount of extracurriculars already, and that you just need this last year of that upward trend to push you over. So if you know that you don't have a lot of experience overall in terms of clinical volunteering, I would recommend you do a lot of that before applying to this program, because this program is more of a, it's designed for students, again, who have a pretty fully built out application, relatively speaking. We just need to fix the grades and get the standardized exam scores, and maybe just like one or two extracurriculars. But we don't want you doing a bunch of the extracurricular things during the year while you're with us. If many courses are offered online, could someone that does not live in Davis be able to still enroll? All students need to be in Davis because the chances of you having a fully online quarter throughout the entire year is just very, very, very unlikely. So everyone's going to have to be here to be in this program. But good question. And yes, you could have taken the MCAT before this program. Totally fine. We look at all of those attempts, and Doug will work with you to make sure that you both are putting a plan of action together to get a better score if that's what we need. Did I miss any questions above? Okay, let me scroll up. I think I missed one. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to go back to Khalid's question. Is the requirement of a 2.8 GPA sharp a double major? Okay, so because we do holistic review, we read all applications, right? So in terms of a 2.8 being sharp, that is definitely what we recommend. Now, we have admitted students who have less than that, but there's got to be other things in the application that we feel like would be compelling enough for us to interview and kind of go through that process. But I still encourage you to schedule an appointment with us. We do prospective student appointments all the time. Doug or Jenny, if you could post that link to our prospective student appointments, that would be great, because I forgot to copy and paste that for today. But I do encourage you to meet with us and let's actually talk it out and see if there's something we can discuss. We would just need some extra time outside of the webinar to talk through that. But again, the 2.8 is really ideal. When you say DIY coursework, would that be like taking additional CC courses after graduation? It could be, yeah, it could definitely be community college courses, especially if you were able to take something like microbiology, anatomy, physiology, some of those larger sciences at a community college. That would be great. I just want to say that if you are pre-dental, you want to be careful of community college. Dental schools are not as accepting of community college classes. Especially East Coast dental schools. So you just have to be a little careful there. But if you're pre-med and a lot of the other health professions, that's okay. That's a good way of at least proving to us that you can handle some coursework before applying. You're welcome. All right, I'm going to keep going. We're almost done. Then I'll open it up fully for questions at the end. I just want to do financial aid and a few other dates. So as I've mentioned several times, 12-month program, the cost is $30,000. This does not include housing. You do have to have your own health insurance as well, transportation and living expenses. So this $30,000, what it does cover is your tuition, test prep materials, your EMT program if you decide to do EMT as your summer track, our committee letter process, and all of those things. And really what it is our advising and our wraparound advising, that second year that I was talking about, where after you finish your coursework, you still have access to us as we walk you through the application cycle for a full calendar year after that. So really, that's the bulk of the value here. And that is really what sets our program apart, is how much we're here for you, how much you can reach out to us and have us walk you through such a intense journey. So we are not FAFSA eligible, meaning we don't qualify for federal loans. So you'll have to finance this program through private loans or other funding services. Some students have family members help out. There's a lot of different ways we've seen it, but if you'd like to connect with our funding team here through CPE, feel free to send an email directly to postbac@ucdavis.edu. It's the one that Jenny just posted in the chat. And we can get you set up with Suzette Odom. She's our finance person. And she'd be happy to walk any of you through some of the best options that you can find to make this the least stressful process possible when trying to fund our program. And finally, we've talked about Post-Bacc extensively, but I just wanted to reiterate this one more time. You have to send all of your application materials to Post-Bacc, no emails, no unofficial transcripts. You must send official transcripts from all institutions to Post-Bacc, including the personal statements being completed in there, letters of recommendation, everything must go through there. Our application opened on April 1st, so this past Saturday. and it'll close July 15th, but we do have round deadlines, which will be on the next slide. If you submit your application by April 30th, which would be the round 1 deadline, or May 31st, which would be the round 2 deadline, that is what we consider our priority period. And we are on a rolling basis. So the sooner you submit your application, especially if you know that you might not be the most competitive post-bac applicant, I highly encourage you to submit before the round 1 or round 2 deadline, because after that, things do get a bit more competitive and it can be more difficult. So the sooner the better is what I recommend. This is actually a typo. There is no, well, if we're the first program, I will say this, if we are the very first program that you're applying to on Post-Bacc, there is a fee of $130 for your first program. But if we're not, and there are other schools you're applying to, we actually don't have a program fee, like an additional fee. So wanted to point that out. And I think I missed a question. Oh, thanks, Doug, for grabbing that one for me. Before I do FAQ, I wanted to get to this slide really quickly. Again, we opened April 1st. Just in case you all wanted to take a screenshot of this, we will be emailing out these slides after the presentation is over, but these were the dates I was mentioning to be mindful of. If you submit in June or July, again, that's when things get a lot more competitive. We're down to the wire. We're a lot less, because a lot of the time in terms of being a rolling admissions program, if we have filled the class or we're getting to that point really early, we may not have as much later. So just make sure that you're doing your best to submit as early as you can. We would love to read your applications, love to get to know you all. And especially if you would like to connect with us before you submit, if you have questions, again, that link above that Doug posted about prospective student appointments, that would be a great Zoom session for you to connect with us if you wanted to learn a little bit more or had more questions. How long does it take for Post-Bacc to verify? It can depend, Elizabeth. It also depends on how many transcripts you're sending over to them, but it usually takes anywhere from 1 week to 3 weeks. And the important thing to note is that if our application deadline closes on the 15th, you need to be verified by July 15th. So I would not wait until July 10th to submit it and hope that it gets verified by the 15th, right? You really want to give yourself at least 3 weeks, just in case. It does take a while, but I have not seen it take longer than 3 weeks. So I hope that's helpful. And then to answer the second part of your question, as long as you hit submit by the first round deadline, even if you're not verified by that, that's okay. We will honor that you hit submit before that deadline date. It's really just this last one here because the actual Post-Bacc platform actually shuts down on the 15th. So if we didn't get the verification by that point, we can't actually read your application. But yes, we will honor submissions on the round deadlines. So good question about letters of rec. As long as your application has been submitted, if you have letters of rec pending, in terms of you being incomplete, yes, we need to wait until we read your letters of rec before offering an interview or not. But if we're talking about, again, hitting a round deadline, like submitting before round 1 or round 2, if your letters are not in by that round, that's okay, because we'll honor the fact that you still hit submit. But if your letters of rec, again, are not in by July 15th, when everything is all said and done, then that is a problem and that is an incomplete application. So I hope that's clear. What did I want to go back to here? Okay. Just for anyone who made the same mistake. Yes, thanks for that. That's a great point. All right, how much time do we have? 4 minutes, okay. I was gonna spend some time going through these, but I do feel like we tackled the last 2 already. And the question about, do I even need a post-bac program? I don't have as much time to get into that today as I would have liked, but I do want to just talk quickly about the second one. We don't have any scholarships for this program. It tends to be difficult to get scholarships for post-bac programs because it's not undergrad technically, and then it's not graduate school technically. You're kind of like in this middle ground. There are scholarships out there. They are just none directly from our program. So I wanted to make that really clear. And whether or not you specifically need a formal post-bac program, those are good conversations to have with us and those prospective student appointments. We can look at your grades, we can look at kind of where you're at and give you a good idea of whether or not this program is a great fit for you, or maybe we would recommend something else that might be an even better fit, and hopefully help you come up with some options for how to proceed forward. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just spend some time for us to answer any other questions that may have been coming through. We covered a lot today, so I'm glad all of you stayed and we're here hanging out with me. It's been great. But I just want to see if there's any other questions that we can clear up before we head out here. Elizabeth, the consortium program is a fall start. It's not a January start. So they have more of that traditional cycle of fall quarter, winter quarter, spring quarter apply, like that year, or that during that, how do I say this? It's really just a one-year program. There is no continuation after that. So that's one of the main differences between our program and theirs. And yes, so the program that I talked about earlier for disadvantaged students, that is actually the UC Davis School of Medicine Post-Bacc program known as the UC Consortium. That program, they bring in about 15 to 20 students per year. You have to be pre-med and you have to come from a background that's underrepresented in medicine or come from a disadvantaged background. Great program. Our program is just different in that we are a health professions program. So we admit students who are pre-med, pre-dental, pre-vet, all of those health professions, and we bring in about 50 to 60 students per year. So slightly different missions there. And when we welcome all students, we don't have a specific category for you to be from a disadvantaged background or underrepresented in medicine background. Thanks, Jenny, for posting that. Do you recommend applying to the program if we plan on taking these DIY courses in the summer? Yeah, if you're going to take courses in the summer, that's totally fine because you wouldn't start with us until January. So I highly encourage you all, even if you applied to our program and got accepted and you knew that you were accepted into our program in June or July, you always want to do what you can to better yourself, right? If you can take some extra coursework before you even start with us, that's only going to help you, right? If you can get an extra volunteer position or an extra scribing position or something, you really want to do whatever you can with the time you have before you submit your application to be the most competitive applicant you can be. So that's fine. That's a good move. Let's see. Let's do maybe one more question. I know we're getting to 5 o'clock here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But if there's one more question, happy to answer before we wrap up. All right. Can we apply for first round and again in June? I wanted to ask because my quarter ends in June. I want to include on my final quarter. So that's a good question. I would recommend still go ahead and apply by the first round, but be very clear in your application that you're waiting on some grades, like you have some grades in progress. And then when you get those grades, that is one thing I would say you can email to us, that postbac@ucdavis.edu. You can email us what's called an update. So I would still say apply as soon as you can, but just be really transparent that there is something else you want us to see before we make our final decision. Okay. You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. This was a really great session. You all asked some really, really good questions. So I hope to be able to meet some of you. I'm sure Doug and Jenny feel the same. We love meeting with students beforehand. And especially if you have really specific questions about your grades, your GPA, your background, we would love to take the time to walk through that with you and see if this program might be a good fit. All right. Okay. Well, I hope to see you all in the future and have a great evening. See you later.